out to you and not Elizabeth or Tootie or the now retired Bugaboo. Because way back in the summer of '09, we sat down one night to play a game of MASH. I had never heard of the game before, which on the one hand surprised you, and the other hand didn't, given that I also hadn't heard of lots of things you knew, from the common flower begonia to the common chocolate spread Nutella. When you told me to write 5 names for the category that would determine whom I would marry, I started getting nervous. Although we had only been dating for a few months, I already knew you had a tendency to read a lot into things. And I didn't want you to get any wrong ideas. I knew that whatever names besides yours I put down would lead to a series of penetrating questions about my choices. Suddenly, I got an idea. I would list you in 4 of the nicknames I had come up with for you. After Elizabeth, I excitedly wrote down Mooney, Tootie, Bugaboo, and Lizzie. But I soon learned this wouldn't fly. You X'd out Lizzie and replaced her with a girl that you decidedly did not want me to end up with. As the game began, I began to sweat. There was a 20% chance I would be marrying this other girl, and I knew that, in addition to reading into things, you had a tendency to see certain events as signs of things to come. What if MASH meant that we weren't meant to be? That this was the beginning of the end? As I tried to keep my own neurotic thoughts at bay, names began to be crossed off. It was down to Mooney and the other girl, and then, by some stroke of luck or fate, the other girl's name was obliterated in a fierce trail of lead, and there was just Mooney, the one and only girl, my darling darling. I would marry Mooney, and thus Mooney instantly became my go-to nickname for you. Mooney. I am often asked when I knew that you were the one. Truth is, I didn't need MASH to tell me that I was going to marry you. The image of you entering intermediate fiction in the fall of '07, a month after our class started, is the most vivid memory from my Brown years. Long collared shirt, hair braided in the back, all the disappointment of the Brown poetry scene on your face, with just a hint for this fiction workshop, hint of hope for this fiction workshop. Your eyes big, lunar blue, intensely vigilant. It was clear nothing escaped you. And as a result, you commanded my full attention. I immediately wanted to read your writing, to have a glimpse into the mind behind those watchful, luminous eyes. But it wasn't just as I now realize, love at first sight. It was also love at first reading. As an 18-year-old freshman, you blew my 19-year-old socks off. No one had any business writing prose like that at any age, let alone 18. It wasn't just that it was rich and lyrical and almost painfully graceful. It seemed utterly effortless. And then there were your comments on my stories. By the end of the semester, I was wildly drunk off James Joyce, and in your feedback on my story, Faded Day, you called me out on it. Needless to say, I was very turned on. I was so turned on, in fact, that I wrote you an email telling you how incisive and right you were, and you wrote me back with reading recommendations, which turned me on even more. So I wrote you back, and then you didn't write me back. I was sad, especially since I then learned you were leaving Brown for NYU. I told myself, well, we'll always have intermediate fiction. But that was a pretty small comfort. Mooney, we owe your 19-year-old self the biggest thank you ever for coming back to Brown. Otherwise, we may have ended with that unanswered email, which we later discovered you never received since Brown had shut down your email account a few days before the semester ended. Fittingly, our correspondence started again over email when, exactly 1 year later, Danny put us in touch to exchange work. I spent a good portion of my winter break in Hawaii that year indoors, crafting an email to you. Unhappy with what I had, I got your instant message screen name instead, and wrote that I had written an email to you, which was true, about exchanging work, but that I write emails in a Word document, also true if the email is important, and that it had unfortunately gotten deleted. Again true, except I left out that I intentionally deleted it. You proceeded to send me the turning point, which wasn't just love at first reading. It was you were the one at first reading. I had never read your poems before, and I certainly never read anything like that before. You sounded like no one else. It was literally the turning point for me. I made plans to meet up to workshop our stuff when we're back in Providence, and I made sure to bring my A game. I'll never forget when you showed up at my apartment. You wouldn't sit down, no matter how many times I offered you my chair. You told me that you liked standing. I think you even said that you loved standing. I thought that if I sat on the floor, you'd take my chair, but you just sat on the floor with me, which ended up being better. You had the line, white ghosts shuffling at the foot of the bed. I told you that you should change white to something else since I already got white from the word ghost. You changed white to mute. This micro-edit was the first of literally countless edits that we've made together on your poems over the past 7 years. I have been thinking a lot about our relationship and our love for each other over the past few weeks, and what I keep coming back to is editing your poems with you. At first, you didn't want me to read your work when it was still raw. You wanted to sit with it for a few days. Then, when you did show it to me, I had to be very careful about what I said. But then Columbia happened. You finally found your community, your people, teachers like Lucy and peers like Max, who really understood you and your work. And with this recognition came a new ruthlessness in you when it came to your work. You were devoted to doing whatever it took to make each poem as good as possible. Since you told me everything every one of your teachers ever said, I absorbed all of their tricks, including a few of my own. After being closed off at Brown, you started to open yourself up again, and the poems started coming. You put your full self into your poems, all of your pain and anger and fears, and unparalleled wit and irony and love. You now needed to show them to me immediately, hot off the press, while you were still in the mindset of the poem. And I would dive in with you. The goal was to find the poem and what was on the page. We both knew that the poem was there. It was just a matter of getting rid of everything that wasn't essential. It meant putting dozens of dazzling lines in the boneyard, either for later use or to remain there forever. In doing this over time, we developed a shorthand, a language that would likely be incomprehensible to anyone else. Virginia Woolf, in one of the first books we read together, The Waves, writes about longing for some little language such as lovers use. We always had our own language. Condo, for when one of us is being condescending. Retrospective, for when one of us comes up with a reason for doing something after the fact. But this was something different. This was a little language that cut right to the heart. Now, when I tell you that something is too much, I don't have to explain what I mean. You just know. And too much can mean different things depending on the line, but you always know what I mean, so there is no need to explain. Any explanation would take us out of the moment, the mindset of the poem that you were still in, and I'm entering with you. Same goes for your responses to my bad suggestions. You don't need to explain why they're bad. I just know and we go on. Over your 3 years at Columbia, we refined and honed this language as you honed your approach to poems and I honed my approach to editing. I stopped expounding too much on what certain stanzas meant. Whenever I would do so, you used to say, the critic is in, and over time, I learned to cut the critic out. And you learned to be patient with me, to give me time to think before putting forth a suggestion, understanding that I was a separate mind that was in the process of coming together with yours rather than your own mind. I've edited your poems in every place you could think of, on airplanes, at bars, at dinners, at parties, and cars, but it's never as efficient as when we are in person. Many of our best editing sessions are when we are together in the thick of it, when our language is so little, it's barely there at all. Where we are communicating through looks and gestures, or before I can even point to a line, you're already at work. So there's a reason why I keep thinking about editing poems when I think about our relationship. Because editing poems captures the essence of our relationship and our love. When we edit, we have reached a point where there is complete openness, complete trust, where we are both listening intently to each other, where we put aside whatever stresses and frustrations we are feeling for the sake of the poem, where we have carved out our little language, where we are two minds and souls coming together as one. Before I marry you, Mooney, I want to make a few promises to you, that I will always listen to you, that I will always make myself open to you, that I will always protect you, that I will always be honest with you, that I will never betray you, that I will care for you tirelessly if you are sick, that I will kiss you every night before you go to sleep, and before I leave no more. Mooney, no one understands me more than you do. Every day. Mooney, no one understands me more than you do. Every day you enhance my own understanding of myself. When we're apart, I experience whatever I'm doing through your mind. I have this switch inside my mind that allows you to enter like light in a room, and then everything I take in is suddenly charged with you. When we're together, I am my happiest and kindest self. I still get that taut feeling in my chest whenever I look at you, when you are sleeping or reading or laughing or looking at me. Today, I know I will get that chest feeling, which I have right now, for the rest of my life. And that is the best feeling I've ever had. I love you more than anything, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life.